Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Why is the middle class shrinking? Why are people facing an affordability crisis while marginalized individuals called informals grow in numbers? Join me as I travel the world, speaking with people living in invisibility, the leaders working to solve it, and uncovering the hard truths shaping our economy and daily reality.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show. A momentous week. The first member of the Trump cabinet has been relieved of her duties. Christy Noem, no longer the head of the Department of Homeland Security. This kind of ends, hopefully, the reign of terror for her longtime paramour, Corey Lewandowski, who candidly has lied, cheated, and stolen his way to stay relevant throughout the Trump era, despite his lack of competence, his scruples, his constant scandals, or any basic capability. He's not a political strategist. He's an advanced man, and a usually drunk one at that. I hate to say this, but in some ways I am responsible because I was the first consultant hired by the 2016 cycle Trump campaign, although this was still 2015. Sam Nunberg, who was a lunatic then working for us, and a candidate would-be Trump, really felt we needed a manager. I thought it was premature. But Sam brought Corey Lewandowski to the table. Now, Corey Lewandowski had managed Senator Bob Smith's re-election campaign in New Hampshire. There was only one problem. Bob Smith lost. He had worked for the Koch brothers, notorious haters of Donald Trump, but he had connections to New Hampshire, which theoretically was important to us because it was the first primary state. So I acquiesced in his hiring. He pledged that he would work in a cooperative spirit with strategic consultants such as myself, and as soon as he was hired, he began his efforts to undercut me and destroy me. The final straw came when the campaign rented some commercial mailing lists, in this case I must say from Newsmax, and of course we had to pay the going commercial rate. An organization can't give a discount to a favored candidate. It's considered an illegal contribution, a corporate contribution. I insisted that was the law. Corey disagreed with me. My book on Hillary Clinton was about to come out. Life was really too short. My relationship with the candidate remained warm. Now, the night before I resigned, I sent a copy of my resignation letter to Maggie Haberman of the New York Times and Mark Caputo, then the top political reporter for the Miami Herald, because I knew the next day that Corey and briefly the president would insist that I was fired when I felt I could be more effective helping Donald Trump from the outside than from inside. I published my book on the Clintons, The Clintons' War on Women. Folks, if you wanted to know anything about Epstein, everything you think you've learned in the last year was all in my book. The fight logs, Bill's multiple presence on Epstein's island. It is Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of the Epstein victims, who said she asked Jeffrey Epstein why Bill Clinton was on the island, and Epstein smirked and said, "Let's just say he owes me a favor." That is in her sworn testimony. That is in my book. Lewandowski's notoriety kind of began when this former New Hampshire state trooper, that tells you a lot, accused of manhandling Breitbart reporter Michelle Fields during a Trump campaign event in Florida. The police charged him with simple battery after the video appeared to show him pulling her arm. I watched this video 100 times. His defenders claiming he did not pull her arm, obviously seeing a different video that I saw. Prosecutors later declined to pursue the charges. Lewandowski was very ably represented by Brad Cohen, a South Florida lawyer, but the optics were terrible for Lewandowski to get physical with a small woman because he lost his cool. It is kind of typical. Of course, who then can forget when he was fired from working for Trump's PAC after attending a Republican dinner in Las Vegas, getting roaring drunk, following an extremely attractive married woman who was there without her husband but had paid to go to the dinner to her room, pounding on the door in the middle of the state, bragging about the size of his manhood. It was at that point that he was terminated. Then, of course, he resurfaced with Christy Noem. Now, his personal relationship with Christy Noem is the largest open secret in Washington. They do not hide it. They live together in a luxury apartment near the Department of Homeland Security that is paid for by the taxpayers. Lewandowski is, by the way, married. But the real question here is one of corruption. And it really begins with a $200 million campaign advertising campaign. This one is for Real ID. That's the program in which everyone must get a real ID before they can travel. That went without bidding, without going through the competitive process, called a national emergency to a advertising firm in Louisiana that is owned by a partner of Corey Lewandowski. Now, more recently, congressional hearings last week revealed a $200 million campaign, once again given to Confederates of Lewandowski and people who worked on Noem's previous campaigns. $200 million campaign budget of her riding on a horse at Mount Rushmore and talking how great Donald Trump is, which is clearly meant to prepare her to be a future candidate, for which, in all honesty, she doesn't have the candle power. But she said under her congressional testimony that Lewandowski, who's not a government employee, plays no role in the approval of contracts when there's a huge body of emails and text messages and first-person testimony saying otherwise. I think he was breaking all kinds of rules to pick up contracts. This is swamp-like behavior that the Congress will no doubt investigate, either under the Republican Party or this party. Senator John Kennedy, Republican Louisiana, particularly critical of this in his remarks. Then, of course, before testifying for Congress about the Russian investigation, Lewandowski stunned lawmakers by claiming that he had no obligation to be honest. That remark instantly became a viral soundbite used by the media to paint every Trump-related operative with a broad brush of being corrupt. The man is literally an idiot. He also mocked the story of a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome who'd been separated from her mother, punctuating the discussion with a dismissive womp womp. This guy had a second offense when he grabbed Trump supporter Joy Villa, a tremendously talented woman, by the buttocks, slapping her several times in the lobby of the Washington International Hotel. She filed a complaint later released. Trishelle Odom, that was the wife of John Odom, star of Street Outlaws and a vocal Trump supporter. That's the case in which Lewandowski made unwanted sexual advances, repeatedly touched her during a charity dinner in 2021. As I say, he followed her to her hotel room, banging on the door, causing a commotion in the hallway, bragging about his manhood. You can't make this stuff up. But his most disgraceful activities come from what should be his final act. He served as an unpaid special government employer here, but staff and lawmakers say effectively he was functioning as the de facto chief of staff. In that role, he bought a $300 million fleet of private jets for DHS, negotiated that sale. One of them actually has a flying bedroom. You can't make this stuff up. He is known as a tyrant. He would actually fired a Coast Guard pilot who mistakenly left Noem's blanket on an airplane. The pilot was fired for leaving the blanket on a plane, and then was once rehired once they realized that no one could fly them home. So Lewandowski fired him on the spot without a pilot. This reign of corruption is really extraordinary, and I'm actually surprised he survived this long. It has been an open secret. Every investigative reporter is talking about corporations and others in the defense industry that he has sought to shake down. Somehow they call him an undestroyable cockroach. I hope that's not the case. The whole Ice Barbie thing was his invention of dressing who is unquestionably a beautiful woman, but dressing her in all these costumes and having her show up at various ICE and detention functions when the real function should have been on the Border Patrol. The problems with the deportation of dangerous illegals are not the professionals at ICE. The professional ICE have extensive law enforcement experience, extensive training, and they know how to de-escalate a situation. It is the cowboys at the Border Patrol, not all of them, of course, there are many good women there, men and good women there, but there are some who have thin training and not as much judgment, and that all falls to would-be presidential candidate Christy Noem. Now, there is one way out for this, and Noem may take it if she's smart. The president gave her a meaningless job. She's an envoy to this new Latin American alliance that was out yesterday. She could run against Steve Rounds, who is the U.S. Senator from South Dakota. Now, Rounds could conceivably be the single dumbest person I've ever met in my life. Certainly extraordinary to be in a state like South Dakota, where Trump's approval ratings are in the 80s, and be anti-Trump in the Senate is a death wish. Having served as governor, Christy Noem could create a new grift for Corey Lewandowski. It's certainly possible. I certainly hope not. I spoke about Lewandowski in the movie Get Me, Roger Stone. I can't quote it here because this is a family program, but you can find it on Netflix if you're really a junkie. In the meantime, I think Mark Wayne Mullen is an excellent choice. Self-made businessman, a very tough guy, undefeated MMA fighter, a true Trump loyalist who stands up for America. Excellent choice. But it opens a Senate race we're going to talk about when we get back in Oklahoma, and we can't afford to drop any Senate races, nor can we afford to elect any rhinos. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Rural Americans deserve access to the best our nation has to offer, especially when it comes to health care. Across every state and every community, America's rural hospitals are the first line of defense, protecting our families, neighbors, and loved ones. No matter where you live, hospital care doesn't clock out. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Each year, America's over 5,000 hospitals care for millions of patients, providing 24/7 emergency care, delivering babies, cancer treatments, and other life-saving care that patients rely on. Behind every one of those patients are doctors, nurses, and caregivers working tirelessly to keep people healthy and safe. Hospitals are our community's lifelines. They employ our neighbors and keep our families' health. But now, some in Congress are threatening access to care. Tell Congress, protect patient care to keep America strong. Don't cut rural health care.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. As a political junkie, of course, I very carefully watch those Texas primaries. Very significant. Incumbent members of Congress virtually never are defeated. They have so many advantages, both in their fundraising capability, the never-ending spigot of special interest money, plus the free mailing privileges and so on. But Dan Crenshaw, sometimes known as what do they call him? Patch Eye McCain. Eye Patch McCain, pardon me. Hardline neocon, anti-Trumper, a lot of ethical questions raised about him. He won in an upset, beat by Trump conservative Steve Toth, a state representative. He's going to join us a little later in the program to talk about that. And, of course, with the firing, and that's really what it is, I mean, they gave Christy Noem a title, but it's a nothing job, face-saving. And that creates, with Mark Wayne Mullen, a tough guy, the only Native American currently serving the U.S. Senate, a wrestling star, one tough hombre, Mark Wayne going over to run DHS. That creates a Senate vacancy in Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma is one of the few states in the country where Trump actually carried every single county, even the most liberal counties. They hate that when we point it out. And there's a number of candidates. The way this works is Governor Kevin Stitt, he betrayed Donald Trump for Ron DeSantis. He begged Trump to campaign for him. He did. Stitt, a businessman, was elected. Stitt repaid that favor by knifing the president in the back. I don't think he's been forgiven. Lately, he's moved left, talking about how outrageous the efforts are to deport dangerous illegal criminals. He's governor. He's not terribly popular. He'd like to become U.S. Senator, but he can't really appoint himself. Voters traditionally, by history, hate it when governors have done that. Nathan Dahm is a three-time loser, was a former Oklahoma Republican Party chair. That's going nowhere. David Ostrow, don't know him, but he works in the governor's office. John O'Connor, that'd be an excellent appointment. Former Oklahoma Attorney General would be an excellent choice. A very good man. Justin Hillary, I don't hear good things about her. Now, she's a senior advisor to the governor, so she clearly got herself on the list. And then one of the richest men in the country, Harold Hamm. Harold Hamm is a legend in the oil and gas industry. He is old Oklahoma. He is known for his business shrewdness and his integrity. And, of course, at his age, he would certainly not seek to hold on to the seat. When this short-term Senate was created by the resignation of Senator Jim Inhofe, they passed a law that said if you were appointed to the seat by the governor, you could not then run for re-election to the seat. I think that law is unconstitutional, but heavy-duty candidates are lining up for the general election. Congressman Kevin Hern would be a strong candidate. State Senator Randy Grellner would be a strong candidate. Jackson Lawmeyer, who challenged Lankford, turned out to be right about that. Turncoat would be considered. This could be a big race. But here's the good news: there's zero chance the Republicans can win. So the question will be: are we going to get ultimately a senator who's an establishment thinker? For a state that is as red as it is, as pro-Trump as it is, the Republican leadership there, particularly Lankford, have been particularly soft. The congressional delegation's a disgrace in terms of established Republicanism and special influence, so it'll be close. We'll see. Stay tuned to listening to the Roger Stone Show, like every weekend.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Last week in Texas, Congressman Dan Crenshaw, a cheerleader for the war in Ukraine, but nonetheless a man who served his country as a naval SEAL, losing an eye while being deployed, and then going to Congress. MAGA Republicans initially wanted to like him because of his heroic public service in the military, and he had kind of a badass persona, but he has been an unabashed rhino. He has been a vocal critic of the Trump administration. He has been a major cheerleader for continued multi-billion-dollar subsidies for the Ukraine war. He's been particularly hostile to the idea that members of Congress should not be allowed to actively trade stocks and bonds. Well, last week, the unthinkable happened. Steve Toth, a Republican who represents Montgomery County in the Texas state legislature, a solid conservative, a pastor, a Christian, a Trump supporter, won this primary in an upset, and this is a huge upset. I mean, Dan Crenshaw was a national figure. I'm quite certain that Steve Toth was outspent in his campaign. But let me just kind of get into where Crenshaw is. Crenshaw supported the Threat Assessment Prevention and the Safety Act, a federalized version of the red flag laws that flip the notion of due process on its head, for example, in buying a gun. This program would have created a behavioral threat assessment program to profile people believed to be potential threats of the Second Amendment. Crenshaw was a cheerleader for this, vocally supported the anti-gun measure when Trump-supporting patriots were being readily persecuted by the deep state. In 2019, Crenshaw co-sponsored legislation urging Trump to keep troops in Syria. He continued to work with the Democrats on House resolutions urging the president to continue to have fights occupying Syria during the guise of fighting ISIS. Crenshaw at the time, I recall this, arrogantly boasted, as someone who served in the Middle East, I know our enemy and I know the value of American forces on the ground. You see where he stands. Trump is using American power in a very projected and lethal way. I'm very excited to have the man to beat him. I jumped the gun here because I thought he was going to join us, but he's joined us in the next segment. Steve Toth served in the Texas legislature since 2012, and he's known specifically for his conservative leadership on issues like border security, election integrity, and limited government. Incumbent members of Congress never lose, so this says a lot more about the Republican Party. Crenshaw was, as I say, one of the most belligerent supporters of Ukraine, and basically Liz Cheney and others are the members of that contingent. My good friends Tim Burchett from Tennessee and Anna Polina Luna from Florida have worked very hard to pass legislation that would end the ability of members of Congress to trade in stocks and bonds, and again, it fell short. Crenshaw, as I recall, made major gains based on his committee assignments. The guy has been a great supporter of Dr. Anthony Fauci, calling him an American hero. I think his most disgraceful actions come during that whole COVID pandemic. He was one of 80 Republicans who supported the Immunization Infrastructure Modernization Act, which created the system to fund a federal vaccination database that can be used to track immunizations nationwide. I don't care whether it's Real ID or whether it's Palantir or whether it's this database. I don't want the government knowing everything about me or anyone. On March of 2020, COVID was spreading rapidly. Crenshaw wrote that day on X that Dr. Fauci is an American hero and the country is blessed to have him leading this fight. All I think Fauci ended up doing was lining his own pockets to the tune of millions and being responsible for the injury, a death, or millions. So Crenshaw will not be missed. And coming up, the man who beat him, this really made my night, Steve Toth, which is why I jumped at the chance of having him on the show today. He joins us shortly right here on The Roger Stone Show, so don't go away.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. Dan Crenshaw of Texas was a swaggering, abusive, loud neocon who served our country as a Navy SEAL, and we salute his service. But beyond that, his boorish activity and his outspoken support for the corrupt regime in Ukraine and sending them more money, his attacks on President Trump, his support for continued military presence. So all these things finally added up, and in an upset, this national figure was defeated in the Texas Republican Party primary by State Representative Steve Toth, who is a pastor, I want to know, also a small business owner from the Woodlands, and represents Montgomery in the state legislature. Now, this is a David versus Goliath fight, and we've got David on the show today. Steve, welcome.
Great to be with you, Roger.
This is a great day for America. This is a great day about our country. I know your public record has been one of conservative leadership, particularly on border security issues, election integrity, and of course our joint belief in limited government. Just because I haven't had a chance to look this up, how much did Dan Crenshaw spend in his reelection, and how much were you able to raise and spend?
I spent roughly $175,000.
Wow.
He spent roughly 4 times that amount. That was just our campaign. We then had a super PAC. I have no idea how much they spent, but from what I've been told, they have a super PAC as well, and they outspent us 4-1, 5-1. But then on top of it, Roger, you had all these additional political action committees that were, Preserve the Rhino, basically political action committees that got involved in it that were just hammering the crap out of me day in, day out.
Yeah, that's
radio
that's
intelligence.
That's how it looks. So once the swamp creatures get to the swamp, they have all these swamp buddies. And they don't have limits on how much they can give to candidates, so they use corporate dollars, in essence, to on the behalf of these special interests to try to keep the incumbent in office, which makes the story of your victory even sweeter. I mean, money is the mother's milk of politics. On the other hand, the candidate who spends the most is not always the candidate who wins. It's the candidate who spends their money the wisest who wins.
Well, and here's the big thing is that I also say that, and I tell grassroots people this, Roger, I've never been in a situation, the Associated Republicans of Texas and Karl Rove comes after me every 2 years in the Texas House, right? Yes. And they have always outspent me 3, 4, 5-1, and I always win. And, my thing is, they can outspend us, but they can't outwork us. And
they're out of touch with the grassroots. They don't understand how Republicans think today.
They don't. So here's the reality is, if you're going to run, you've got to raise enough money to define who you are. That's all you have to do is raise enough money, do the hard work, and that's the problem, Roger. We get so many guys that want to run in grassroots elections, but they're not willing to do the hard work of you've got to raise enough money, which means you're going to have to go to your friends and family and ask for help. And no one wants to do that. It's the hard part.
Absolutely true. Look, I have this conversation with would-be candidates every day. As soon as somebody says to me grassroots, I blanch. I'm for grassroots activity in any campaign. I consider it the gravy. But if you can't communicate, if you can't dominate at least one medium, whether it's cable or radio or God forbid, phones, text messages, this is about voter contact. And 80% of the revenues from any campaign, whether you're running for dog catcher or President of the United States, should go into mass-based communications. But many people don't understand that. They think a campaign is having some yard signs made up and going around and talking to Republican meetings and talking to our own voters. So I know what you mean about the difficulty, and taking on an incumbent is a thankless task, of course, because Dan had access to all of the defense contractors and all of those who want business as usual in Washington.
Yeah, the best advice that I ever got was back in 2011. Kevin Brannon said to me, when I told him I wanted to run for the Texas House, he said, "How are you at asking for money?" And I said, "I'm terrible. I can ask for money for other people, but not me." And he said, "Steve, you're just a pretender, but you're not a contender." And I said, "So you're telling me I got to get over that?" And he said, yes, you do. He told me how much money I had to raise, and I went out and raised it, and we still got outspent 10-1, and we won. We won 57-43. But he knew how much money I had to raise to define myself and define my message. And, guys have got to do that. We've got to do the hard work.
Well, I note in your bio that you are my brother in Christ, and that you are a pastor. I'm curious as to if you think that played any role in terms of your support among evangelical Christian voters.
I think it may have to some degree, but more than anything, I think in the midst of just getting hammered, be anxious for nothing, but in all things by prayer and petition, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. I mean, Roger, I couldn't turn the radio on. I couldn't turn television on without me being... Here's a really wild... He actually tried to run to the right of me and called me a rhino. He said, Steve Toth votes with Democrats. Steve Toth is a friend of Democrats. He's a liberal, right? And I'm like, this is just... so ridiculous.
Well, I think Carl's losing it a little bit, I mean, ever since George P. got his derriere kicked, I think that they've been in retreat to a certain extent.
Yeah. Well, and they're doing it right now against Ken Paxton with John Cornyn, right? I mean, it's so ridiculous. The kind of campaign that Cornyn is trying to raise against Ken, it's unbelievable.
I must say, though, I've been in politics for 50 years. I have never seen a more selfless, patriotic act than Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, saying that he'll avoid a contentious and expensive runoff and drop out of the race if the Senate will dump the filibuster and let J.D. Vance, the Vice President, break the tie for the Save America Act, as Trump correctly calls it. That is you don't see statesmanship. I think it's a sincere offer. I don't think they'll take him up on it, but it shows, it's very rare you see someone in politics put their country ahead of their personal ambitions. That's
the guy he is. Look, I know him professionally, and I know that he's always willing. Ken, people get mad at me when they say Ken's soft-spoken. I said, well, it's the only way I can describe the guy. He's not fiery. He leads with his actions, not his rhetoric. But who is the guy who's on a personal level? Ken is a selfless servant, political servant. He's not a politician. He doesn't have that swagger. He doesn't have that blowhardness. He's just a good guy that wants to do the right thing for Texas and the United States.
Well, he's been a total and complete Trump loyalist. That I think is, yep. And is going where others feared to tread. Yep. It's a very compelling situation. It is also not lost on me that the Democrats managed to dump Jasmine Crocker and give us a Beto O'Rourke light, the latest version of Beto O'Rourke, and they're going to try to dress Talrico up as some kind of moderate, which is absurd.
Roger, I'll tell you what, he is. I know this guy. I've served with him in the Texas House. This is the most liberal man that's ever come out of the state of Texas. He makes Beto O'Rourke look like a neocon. He makes him look like a conservative.
Well, he continues to misstate scripture repeatedly.
Oh, it's grotesque. It's really truly grotesque.
Claiming to come from a religious background, he completely misstates scripture.
Yeah, he came in 2019, and I served with him in 19, 21, 23, and 25. In 19, 21, and 23, those were the 86th, 87th, and 88th sessions. He was this nasty, mean-spirited, cynical, backstabbing, nasty guy from the back mic that defended every leftist agenda you could think of. And then all of a sudden he comes back in 25 and he's completely remade himself as this pastoral, sweet-hearted, good guy that just loves everybody, And it's not who the guy is. It's not. The level of evil of what he portrays and what he wants to advance on our culture and tearing the penises off of little boys, the breasts off of little girls, allowing biological males into ladies' restrooms, to critical. I passed a bill in the 87th session that banned the teaching of critical race theory in public schools. And my biggest opponent on that was James Tallarico, and wanting to convince little white kids that they're oppressors and children of color that they're oppressed. Gee, what could go wrong in a situation like that when you tell children that they're oppressors and you're oppressed? Well, violence in the classroom, which is where we're at in Texas and across the United States, from the cynical, awful view of critical race theory being taught in our classrooms. And he's just a purveyor of it.
Yeah, he's one to watch, though. They always try to redress themselves as a moderate, you know.
Yeah, they sure do.
I mean, as I recall, Beto O'Rourke's real name wasn't even Beto O'Rourke, so.
Yeah, I don't remember what the guy's like a forgotten bad dream. I don't even remember what it is.
It's very interesting. I was at Mar-a-Lago this weekend. I ran into a gentleman who said he's a very, very good friend of former Texas Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes. Ben Barnes was a protege of Lyndon Johnson. You know what Ben Barnes told him? Roger Stone's book on the Kennedy assassination, Blaming it on Lyndon, he got it right on the head. How do you like that?
That's great.
All right, so Steve, where can people go to support your campaign?
SteveTothForCongress.com.
There it is, Steve Toth for Congress. Thank you so much for joining us on late notice. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Roger. God bless you.
All right, folks, we'll be right back with more politics on the other side. So whatever you do, don't leave us online or touch that dial. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You know, I think election integrity advocates on the right too often get bogged down in the details of complicated voting machine technicalities, hardware, foreign interference, multifaceted conspiracies, including the very strong possibility of foreign interference, both by China and Venezuela. But at a certain point, I think a lot of that gets lost to the public. And then additionally, there are those inside the government who don't want all Americans to know about the technical abilities to manipulate elections, because I suspect our own State Department has been doing so for many years. But it is very clear, however, that if you're a frontline warrior in the fight against voter fraud, we have the one grand slam attack, and that is the SAVE Act, or as the president calls it, the Save America Act. If you're still standing after all of the attacks, the gaslighting, and outrageous denigration of anyone who raised the reasonable question of election integrity, that A, they insist there is no evidence whatsoever, B, that you're some kind of a lunatic, and C, your comments, your statements are somehow illegal, even though we still have theoretically free speech in America. So in the SAVE Act, you have a problem which can be solved. It has the perfect basis to do so. It merely requires that one be a U.S. citizen in order to vote in a federal election, and require a government-issued ID before registering to vote in that election, along with clear proof of citizenship. In other words, the way you get ID is by proving you're a citizen. It also limits mail-in ballots, which even Attorney General Bill Barr, before he turned on Trump, admitted in an interview on CNN with Wolf Blitzer that they are an open invitation for voter fraud, and limiting mail-in ballots to specific circumstances. As it used to be, we called them absentee ballots for illnesses, disabilities, military service, or necessary business travel. There's 50 votes for this today in the U.S. Senate, but because of arcane rules among gentlemen, the filibuster rule will not allow Senator Thune, the majority leader, to bring it to the floor, which is outrageous. As we said in the last segment, Ken Paxton, who is now in a runoff in Texas for the U.S. Senate, what will be an expensive and bloody contest, with the incumbent John Cornyn, has offered to drop out of the race to save the party the expense and the trouble if Thune will break the filibuster rule and give us the Save America Act, which could save the country. There is no question the Democrats hope to flood this country with illegals, ultimately convert them to citizenship or not, and vote them. That has been the trend, and that's what this is all about. Here is a one-time opportunity to fix that problem. About now, my guess is that President Trump is sorry that he decided to support Senator Thune, an acolyte of Karl Rove, a man who called on Donald Trump to drop out of the race after the famous NBC Billy Bush grabbed them by the, tape became public, and instead went with Florida Senator Rick Scott, who's turned out to be a staunch and loyal supporter of the president, but that we are sitting at the cusp of 50 votes and we cannot save the country is maddening. We should do away with the filibuster law, and here is why. Because the Democrats will the instant they control the Senate, and they will jam through the most outrageous, extremist legislation and appointments you can possibly imagine. So we might as well act first. These rules among gentlemen, that the two senators from a state, who may or may not themselves be worthy of investigation, have to sign off on who the U.S. attorney is in that state through some informal blue slip, is outrageous. Letting elected officials veto prosecutors who could look into their wrongdoing is an outrage. It's time to change the rules.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. It was a great interview with Steve Toth, who defeated Eye Patch McCain, Dan Crenshaw, in the Texas House primary. Joining me now is John Fawcett. John Fawcett hosts the American Podcast. John Fawcett is a longtime associate of the great Lou Dobbs. I think it's fair to say that John and I both learned a lot about politics from the great Lou Dobbs. John also learned a lot about politics from the gritty streets of Staten Island, where you learn how politics really works. He has a great podcast. I try to join him at least once a week. John and I have something in common. We actually tell you what we really think. We don't really care what people think about that. John, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Honored to be with you today on your show. As you said, you're with me every week, and it's a delight and honor to have you there from one of the most brilliant political minds to ever walk this earth.
Well, that's very kind. I think you can be found on virtually every platform. It is indispensable watching John he's not a Washington insider, but he's got a Washington insider's knowledge of what's going on in the swamp, and we get through a lot of material in an hour-long show sometimes because there is so much going on. Let's kind of start at the top. Christy Noem, clearly a face-saving appointment, envoy to an organization that was formed yesterday, now talking openly about the possibility of trying to challenge Senator Rounds in South Dakota, which would be a way to rehabilitate her career. But I still think she will be weighed down by the epic corruption and boorish behavior of Corey Lewandowski, and I suspect there will be investigations about his manipulation of contracts and other ethical problems at DHS.
There's no doubt about that. It's indisputable. The fact, Roger, that we saw yesterday, as you mentioned, the event at Doral down in Florida at President Trump's property there, Corey Lewandowski sitting front row, I think is just a slap in the face and brazen, as I believe he's part of the reason why she was demoted. Now, there's some people who tell you this was 5D chess, that she was being promoted, but, I both know that, having the role taken from you, running DHS to this new position she's in now, is a clear demotion in the way of President Trump. You know President Trump for 40 years. I think I joked the other day. You know better than anyone how kind this man is, how kind he is, and the things he does for people who aren't always loyal to him and don't always have his best interests. So this was a gift from President Trump to help her save face. Running for a Senate race with all of the baggage that she carries, Roger, if the alleged affair is true, I think there's probably more. As Lou Dobbs used to say, when it seems like something's wrong, Roger, you lift up the rug, there's probably a mouse under there. It seems like she's got a few mice.
Well, I mean, look, there's no question in this case where Corey attended a Republican dinner in Las Vegas, got drunk, followed this woman Odom to her door, pounding on the door, bragging about his sexual prowess. She complained to her husband called the cops. The matter was ultimately dropped, but he was fired from his job at MAGA. There's no question that it is a demotion, but the larger question here is this $220 million media contract, which, by the way, I believe is actually one of two. So there's $220 million media contract to buy television ads, both internationally and in the United States, urging people to self-deport, but they star Christy Noem in a cowboy hat riding a horse at Mount Rushmore. This is Corey's idea of image building. I heard the president, when she testified, the president had approved this program. I'm told the president had no memory of that, was very, very displeased. And, of course, if you trace it back, this no-bid contract, which was given on a no-bid basis as discretionary spending, as an emergency act, ends up in the hands of a company that was formed the day before they received the funds, but then immediately transfers the $143 million to a company owned by a current or former partner of Corey Lewandowski's in Louisiana, with the rest of the money going to the political consulting firm that worked on Christy Noem's 2 campaigns for governor. The optics of this are horrific. Senator John Kennedy ripped it in Senate hearings. It's thievery, is what it is, and we don't need to be building the name ID of Christy Noem. She stars in all of these commercials. Now, yes, she is smart to say how great the president is, but this plus the Ice Barbie routine of her showing up in all these costumes at various emergency sites and arrests, I think looks really foolish.
Yeah. President Trump not remembering, President Trump, like I said, I'll reiterate, 40 years. President Trump not remembering something is very rare, and the reason he doesn't remember it is because he didn't approve it. President Trump is extremely frugal and in the most delightful sense, saving this country every dollar he can possibly save us.
Well, and John, $300 million in a jet fleet, including the master jet with the master bedroom, so they can join the Mile High Club?
Well, Roger, the most troubling, I think, part about this entire thing was I think about $150 million of that contract was flowed into a company, the Shell company, that was just 8 days old. Now, you've been in business for a long time, Roger. An 8-day-old company getting a $143 million contract. I'd love to go to school where they went to school.
It's very similar to that media company that got $220 the day after they were incorporated. This is all going to be investigated, and it is. I think all roads lead back to Corey Lewandowski, who's not a political strategist. He's a lout. He's a bully and a lout. Who knows? They say he's the indestructible cockroach. We shall see. But he's got a lot of attorney's fees and investigations coming. Let us turn, if we may, to Steve Bannon. Steve has had a rough couple of weeks. I mean, Steve Bannon helms the war room at Real America's Voice, holds himself out to be a Trump loyalist, the last Trump loyalist, but then these emails emerge showing him denigrating Trump, calling Trump stupid, seeking to undermine Trump, suggesting Trump should be removed under the 25th Amendment. That's bad enough, but he also very clearly can be seen coaching Epstein on how to make his comeback, how to rehabilitate his public image after being convicted of sex crimes, and being seen with all of these famous pedophiles, Woody Allen, for example. My reading here of the email released by the DOJ is that Jeffrey Epstein personally booked a flight for Steve Bannon to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and from there, the email says Steve is staying with me. So becoming pretty clear to me that he did indeed visit the island.
the most troubling part about it all, Roger, which Steve is not a stupid man, maniacal for sure, evil, that's for sure, but he's not a stupid man. He was out on the forefront of releasing the Epstein documents. He was out there saying we want him released, and I'm not sure quite what he was thinking, knowing how implicated he was. Calling somebody brother, you don't do that lightly to someone that you don't really care for, someone you really love.
Well, let's be very clear. In Steve Bannon, you have a man who was charged with stealing $15 million from the Build the Wall Foundation, was pardoned as a federal crime, was re-indicted in New York State under the same crime. His two co-conspirators went to jail for a long time under the federal charges. At the last minute, he pled guilty and he served no jail time. But he's an admitted thief. He also, when his financial patron, Miles Guo, about which much more will be written in the next couple of weeks, is convicted of a $1 billion financial fraud. Steve Bannon is an unindicted co-conspirator, but there are no charges against him, which criminal defense lawyers tell me that's usually a sign that someone is cooperating. In both of those cases. This guy is a squirrely character to begin with. I noticed him first visiting Epstein's home in New York. I saw a tiny item on page 6 of the New York Post, and I knew that something was up. The most outrageous thing I saw, John, is the email in which he says that he, Steve Bannon, is the centerpiece of this movement, not Donald J. Trump. This is a man who rarely bathes, who rarely shaves, who rarely brushes his teeth. I actually spoke to a colleague of his at Goldman Sachs who said even then he had to be told to get a clean suit.
It's embarrassing. You mentioned the money. He had to have made a lot of money from Jeffrey Epstein to do a job like that. I'd love to know where the money went. I think Steve's big problem, Roger, is, and I think this is what his problem was with you, with why he was so disgusting against you in your cases, is it's a big jealousy issue. Steve wants to be the alpha in the room all the time when he's truly the beta, surrounded by people like you and President Trump. And I don't think he's ever fathomed or could ever quite get around to the fact, Roger, that he really had no influence on President Trump. President Trump, as President Trump likes to say, fired him like a dog, left him out on the street embarrassed, like a dirty dog. And
but Steve sees himself as some kind of leader of the worldwide movement for nationalism. He did a superb job on Bolsonaro's reelection. And, he just has a very inflated view of his importance in the greater scheme of things. Look, I think once there's greater examination of where his funding came from post-White House, it will eliminate him from any position of leadership in the movement. That's coming. And frankly, he had to pay a huge number of influencers and institutions to kind of spin his narrative. And then more recently, you'll notice those same people have nothing to say about these shocking revelations.
Yeah, it's 100%. I just don't know, Roger, and I wonder this, how he rebounds from this. I think what has to be done is he has to be shut out from the Trump White House. They have to persona non grata.
I think that's largely done. I mean, he was there not that long ago when the president was considering going to war, obviously concerned that Steve would attack him if he made that decision the first time. We wouldn't call it war. It would launch these limited attacks. I think there's a huge difference in Trump. We talked about this the other day. Trump is using American power in a very limited, focused, lethal way. That's not boots on the ground. That's not mass casualties. And that's not multi-billion-dollar contracts for Halliburton. This is a very focused use of American power. So he's not a neocon. You don't have boots on the ground. You don't have the mass casualties. But he also is not afraid to project American power when he has to, when our inherent national interests are challenged. The level of drugs coming into this country from Venezuela and from Honduras had to be dealt with, and it has now been dealt with. And by the way, in the meantime, we got to cut off the oil to the Chinese and the Cubans. How'd that work out? That's a masterstroke.
Yeah, Cuba's, and you've heard President Trump over the last few days say Cuba is going to be the next one to fall. Lindsey Graham's very excited about it. Just going back to Iran and the boots on the ground thing, you're getting a lot of pushback from people, and it's mainly on Twitter. I don't think this is reality. I think this is some sort of cult that they're trying to form inside the MAGA coalition to try to split it, and I think it's a completely fraudulent one that they're trying to make. But you look at what he's done here in Iran. It's no boots on the ground operation. He did what he had to do. And it is no new war. This is a war, Roger, that started in 1979 with Iran. And President Trump now, many years later, is going to be the one to finish the job off once and for all. The most hysterical part about it all and the hypocrisy of it all is we saw over the course of the last 6 months the No Kings rallies from these Marxist Democrats on the streets protesting. But now they're out there protesting, Roger, asking why we killed a dictator and why we killed a king. And the whole thing of it is just so ass backwards. And you see these polls now coming out, fake polls, President Trump down, down, down. They're talking now about gas prices, Roger. They're talking now, Chuck Schumer yesterday, the strategic petroleum reserve, the strategic reserve. What he's not talking about is when President Trump left office, it had about 640 million barrels of oil. When President Trump came back into office, it had about 395 million barrels of oil in it because Joe Biden drained the thing dry. And what people don't realize is the thing is there for catastrophe situations. So hurricanes, when gas prices are going through the roof and people are gouging and they can't get their supply, they release a little bit about it. And it's got about 120 to 150 days reserved for the American people. But Joe Biden drained this thing just for the hell of it to try to pull his poll numbers up, and you heard nothing about it. On Inauguration Day in 2021, Roger, the average gas price was $2.30 or so. At the peak of Biden's presidency, it was about $5. And when he left his last day in office, it was back down to $3. And it was because he drained our strategic reserve, and nobody said a damn thing about it, including Chuck Schumer.
All right, we'll be right back with John Fawcett of the American Podcast. Don't go away.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show, entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with my colleague John Fawcett. John is the host of the American Podcast and longtime associate of the great Lou Dobbs, and an outspoken conservative in his own right. John, what did you make of the epic upset defeat of Dan Crenshaw in Texas?
So this is, I think, something we spoke about the other day on my show, Roger, is the fact of the MAGA coalition and the fact that it's not dead and it's not dying. Dan Crenshaw has been a thorn in the side of MAGA, America First, and anything good for this country, for that matter, with the exception of him lining his own pockets with his very favorable and very questionable stock trades. The American voter, and more importantly, Roger, the MAGA voter, have their eyes open. And I listened to your segment before with Steve Toth, a resounding victory for him with the MAGA coalition telling Dan Crenshaw to go kick rocks and head off into retirement because they're not going to stand for this. They're not going to stand for the rhino ways anymore. And you look at what President Trump has done to Congress. He's cleared that place out for the most part with the rhinos. Crenshaw being one of the last few left. There's about 2 or 3 that need to go. But President Trump in the last 10 years resoundingly clearing house of the rhinos.
Yeah, very, very interesting to see. I saw last week the Pechanga Indian tribe of California honoring Nancy Pelosi. I'm still trying to figure out how on a salary when she started as Speaker, $125 a year, today $175. How did she amass a fortune of $168 million? How is that possible?
Well, when you have a husband at home, Roger, who gets very favorable insights, into what's going on and all the things that are going on behind the scenes, whether it be the military-industrial complex or anything inside of Washington, D.C., I think it gives you a very favorable view on where to place your stock picks. Make no mistake, at the age that Nancy Pelosi is at, Roger, traveling 6 hours each way, 5-6 hours each way from California to D.C. each and every week, so 12 hours, 13 hours, 14 hours, maybe a week, for a measly $174,000, when her husband's got tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. it should be a real eye-opener to the American people. But she's grandfathered in, Roger, into this, group of people, this tribe of people, no pun intended, where they have absolute immunity.
It's interesting. Then you look at Mitch McConnell, who starts out as a dirt poor country judge. Yep. Mitch is now worth, I think I got this right, the public figures are a little behind where they should be, but I think he is worth something like $164 million. Much of this, however, comes from his wife, Lorraine Chow, who has used her family's relationships in communist China to get some very unique business deals not available to any other American company. Now, I can't say those deals are illegal, but I do think they're highly questionable. How do you amass that kind of fortune? By the way, she was the longest-serving member of the Trump cabinet, despite these long-term relationships through her family to communist China. This whole issue, which Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna are championing, of stopping members of Congress from using inside information to trade stocks and bonds, and they should also end the revolving door. So if you leave Congress, you shouldn't be able to come back and lobby Congress 5 minutes later. There should be a waiting period.
Yeah, it brings you to the question, Roger. We've been witnessing this now, but it's really intensified over the last few years because I think of great groups on Twitter. There's like Pelosi Tracker and all these different groups on Twitter that track the trades of these people, Mitch McConnell and the rest of them, and you can follow all of them and you can make the money with them. The problem is their disclosures aren't for 30 days after, so they can do 100,000, 10,000 trades, and you don't get to see them in real time. You see them 30 days after the fact, so you can't join in on the fun to make the money. It raises the million-dollar question, Roger. Why has it taken so long, and why has it not been done yet for these people, once and for all, to just ban all trading? Crypto, stocks, everything's got to go.
I could not agree more. All right, John Fawcett, the American Podcast. You can find him on X as well as every place great podcasts are seen. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
At Manhattan University, a graduate degree is not out of reach. You'll gain real-world skills, credentials employers value, and connections to New York City's top companies. Choose from their new Master of Science degrees in healthcare informatics, digital marketing and analytics, business analytics, or financial analytics, all built around hands-on learning and industry partnerships. Graduate ready to lead, not just work. Take the next step at manhattan.edu/graduate. Manhattan University. Lead the future.